大家好，我是 Ivy， 很高兴今天在一个下雨天的晚上，然后在 President Day 的晚上跟大家讲讲关于，请我们 Dr. Austin 跟我们讲讲关于volunteer service， 然后怎么样写一个比较好的 essay 拿到 scholarship。那我昨天自己也在做 volunteer， 其实我在看的时候，我觉得 volunteer 一个最大的意义并不只是为了一个 scholarship， 或者说是一个good essay。我觉得当你在 volunteer 的时候，你会认识不同的人，不同的背景，然后你会变成一个很 open 的人。那我自己的感觉是说，因为 volunteer 让我 appreciate 我的 life。那我们现在 welcome Dr. Austin.
Ivy. What I'm going to talk about today is the Volunteer Service Award scholarships that I looked at and what I learned from them, but also about volunteer service in general and what a huge difference it can make and exactly how you can make the most impact. There's really three things I want you to get out of this. One, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary volunteer service. The second one is really legitimacy, and the third one is so what? And we'll talk about that, those three things, okay? So what I did, I think it was in December, I read about 38 essays from TNMU students, and I picked from those the 10 top, the ones that I really thought were the best. And what I did was I looked at them, and I think every judge had a different point of view. I looked at them as if I was an admissions director and who I would pick, okay? Before I talk about that, I want to begin with some larger issues. First of all, I want to say that I love working with Asian American students because the Asian American students I work with can do anything. They have that incredible, strong family foundation in which people are ambitious for them to succeed. They're all really intelligent. They're disciplined. They can delay gratification, which is very important. So it's wonderful to work with them. But there's two things that I see over and over again with almost every Asian student that I work with, and that is that they need more leadership and they need volunteer service that has more impact. And that's what I'm going to talk about. For instance, one of the things that I've noticed is that because kids are so, and parents are so eager to get the most competitive scholarships, get into the most competitive colleges, that they don't let their kids season a bit. And what I mean by this is you have to start and do kind of ordinary volunteer before you can do extraordinary. You know, you have to begin somewhere. I don't think that kids all of a sudden, like I have a lot of 9th and 10th graders that want to get into Cosmos, okay? And Cosmos 2017 application states this. This is their prompt. Tell us why you are a superb candidate for Cosmos. And what they're saying is, convince us that we should pick you. Out of the 10,000 people that apply for Cosmos, and that's how many apply, they only take 149. Why should we pick you? Convince us that you're superior. And so a lot of kids, you know, simply because they have a 4.0, which is not easy to get, or simply because they have good test scores, and they take a lot of AP Science, and they do well, and also perhaps they even know a computer language, C++ or Java, but it's not enough. And the reason it's not enough, because it's not enough for Asian Americans. If the same kid was African American, Hispanic, or socioeconomically challenged, because I have gotten a lot of African Americans and Hispanic kids into Cosmos, okay? So it was a socioeconomically challenged white kid who was trying to get into Cosmos, and they had a 4.0, and they had 1,300 as a sophomore on their PSATs, and they knew C++, they'd get in. But if you're an Asian American, right, who's getting the best education possible, in fact, your family moved because that was such a good public school, right, or they rent a house there so they can go, and you get You're getting an excellent education. You know how to delay gratification. You have the discipline to study Friday nights and on weekends, and your 4.0 reflects that. And you've already taken your SATs in the 10th grade and gotten a really high score. It's still not enough, okay? It's not enough. I think many people think that because they come from they go to the right school, or they take the SATs early, or they have that 4.0, that it'll give them kind of the golden ticket, and it won't. Because talent, and many of the Asian Americans I work with have lots of talent. That's not saying, particularly in music and art, they really have a lot of talent. But you have to have, besides that bottom line of the GPA, and also some talent, you need to have leadership. And the other thing that I want to point out is, I work with students in the Bay Area. And so these same 5,000 Asian American students in San Jose, in Los Altos, in Los Gatos, in Palo Alto, in San Mateo, in Berkeley, in San Francisco, and Oakland, they're all competing against each other, right? And so you have to have an edge, and that's what I'm going to talk about. You have to have a plan to become superior. And one of the easiest ways to really have impact and become superior over other, kids that are trying to get into the same schools and the same summer programs is volunteer service. But, again, I see students trying to leap forward and trying to start their own volunteer service in the 8th and 9th grade. I mean, that's what I saw in some of these scholarships. Very young kids already saying they started a volunteer service, and there's no evidence that it's had much impact. This is very important. You can start something, but it doesn't have much meaning unless there's really an impact. For example, one of the ones that I said, and I'm just looking at this to give an example, was about a young woman that when she was, I believe, in the 9th grade, one of her friends was very depressed, and she wanted to do something about it, and she didn't feel the school did enough, which I think is tremendously wonderful for her to do. And so she says in the essay that she spoke to the counselor and the principals, and she actually got them to start doing workshops and stuff about suicide and depression. The problem about that there wasn't enough real evidence that I could see that this really happened. She was really able to do something in 4 years. I know how high schools are slow to move. So it's amazing that she even tried. But I would need more to establish legitimacy. I would need a recommendation. I would need an article about it, something that really showed she did that. Anybody can say anything, and that's why legitimacy is so important. I believe she was totally sincere about doing it. It just didn't come off. So here's a great line that I want you to remember. Be so good that they can't ignore you. This is by Cal Newport. He's an incredible teacher at MIT. And his point is that the way that you shine, the way that you're superior, is that you're just so good that no one can deny that you're not good. And here's an image. The image is, let's say you choose volunteer service. Look at it like a campaign. And pick your battles with the campaign. Don't try to do everything to become really good at something. One of the clearest, easiest ways is volunteer service. You can show leadership in volunteer service. You can show innovation. You can show compassion. But you have to show evidence that what you did or are trying to do has impact. Another example from the scholarship essays that I read was this young man that started a volleyball team to support underserved students for them to play volleyball, which I think is great. But there was no evidence. So with the other girl, there was no evidence that it really had happened. With this one, I know it really happened. I totally believe that. But there was no evidence that it had any impact at all. It mattered at all. Okay? So this idea about evidence/legitimacy and impact is very important. One thing that I want to mention is colleges receive thousands of applications. Columbia gets 28,000 applications. 28, and they read them. They read them, they cull them, and they really look at them. But you need to really very quickly establish your legitimacy. And this is just a little postscript here. But anything outside your school, except the Y, the Boys and Girls Club, the Boys Club, the Girl Scouts, a particular arts center, feels suspect. Because Asian American families, and I keep going back to this, love their kids so much and value education so much. It feels like this center or this outside club was established by Asian American parents to help their Asian American kids get into college. Okay? So the particular volleyball one, Asian American kind of center, and it just felt a little bit set up, There was another one that I saw, someone came in, and it was the Young Men's Leadership Club, I believe. And it was so obvious that this was set up, at least from what I could tell, by parents that were worried about their boys not having enough leadership. That's not the way to do it. There are so many other ways to do it. It just felt fake. And why I say this, because the volleyball had no public impact. It has to have public impact that an admissions officer or scholarship judge could know of outside the Asian American community. Okay, so you're competing to get into the top schools: Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, Columbia, University of Chicago. And in these ways, now remember this. There's probably 25 top schools, and then there's 150 to 300 other great schools, okay? These schools, I want to point out something to you, particularly the Ivy League and the Ivy League-like schools, which Chicago is and Northwestern is, and Stanford is. It's not Ivy League. In some way, these schools are very traditional, and the traditional ways of showing leadership, like president, captain, editor-in-chief, manager, chair, director, vice president, not so much secretary and treasurer, okay, unless you've made an impact on the club and your school by being that, okay, getting the Eagle Scout Award, getting the Gold Award in Girl Scouts. It's that kind of thing that they know that that's leadership. That doesn't mean you can't think outside the box. That's what I do all the time with people. Another way of being innovative, another way of doing leadership created by parents so that their kids can have more extracurricular activities. You can see it in a second. An important point is that universities and colleges are run by students and not parents. And they want students that have shown themselves to be leaders and leaders in their community or their high school. You do not have to join a lot of clubs. You don't have to be student body president. You don't have to do any of those. But you do have to show yourselves to be leaders in your community. And volunteer service is definitely one of the most effective ways to show that. You can start a club, you can start a volunteer service, but it better impact the people you're serving. I think a lot of people heard, start a club, that'll show leadership. And all these clubs start and no one attends them, and they don't do anything, so they're a waste of time, okay? For instance, about the piano certificate, playing the piano and doing certificates, because it didn't show much impact or service to the community. When you're in the marching band, when you're in the symphony, when you're in, the wind ensemble, you are making an impact at your school and your community. But when you're, playing piano and it's just going certificate to certificate, no one is really impacted except you. Okay, and then I know what kids do is they play at senior centers and they do fundraisers for the music program. But the reason it's not that helpful for college is there's not much impact. I think that somebody studying piano or cello or viola or violin is extremely important, but you need to show that, okay? One of the things, and I just want to share with you, one of the things that stand for exactly what I'm talking about. They're talking about the students that they accept. Although we're open to all sorts of students, on the whole, we accept students who are in the top 5% of their class, semifinalists or finalists in the National Merit Scholarship, or have top ACT over 33 or SAT scores over 1,500, and have received regional, statewide, or national awards, and in some realm of their life have exhibited extraordinary impact, either with their talent, with their leadership, with their volunteer service. Okay? Now, this really gives you the map of what a top school wants. Okay? Top 5% of your class, either a semifinalist or finalist in the National Merit. ACTs over 33 or SAT over 50, some kind of regional, statewide, or national awards. And in some realm of your life, you have exhibited extraordinary impact with your music, with your leadership, or your volunteer service, okay? Now, what I'm looking at is extraordinary impact and how you do that. The top 3 winners that I chose out of the applications really had this impact. That's why I chose them. I chose them because they showed me evidence on their resume and in their essay, and they really had extraordinary impact. Can I say a name? Can I say the name? Sorry. He not only created a volunteer database for his high school, but he created iTrack, I-T-R-A-K-R, so it's iTracker, an app for it. 400 students currently use it and have logged in 27,000 hours. Lots of evidence, lots of impact. Equally important, his resume showed me he's the real thing. There is evidence that he did what he said. How do I know? He received the Congressional App Award, not the volunteer service. There's actually an app award that you can get for the iTracker application. And what really sealed the deal is that he gave a list of references. We didn't even ask for recommendations, but he had references that you could call to say, is he the real thing? So to me, he was one of the top. Another one was Michael. He created and established Legos for underrepresented children, as well as working with disabled people on STEM projects. This thing about, there are a lot of robotics clubs, but they're not really for underserved kids, nor are they for disabled kids. So I really liked that he picked a niche that really needed that, so it had real impact. Another one was Aaron. He taught Java to 41 kids at a computer science camp that he established. This was something that he had a talent for. Not only was he outstanding at a young age in computer science, but he had a gift for explaining Java language in a much clearer way to his peers than the teachers. He took his talent and continually expanded it until he'd established a very successful computer science camp. Okay? So you can see they had evidence and real impact. I'll tell you about a ninth grader that, one of the scholarships that I read, that even though he didn't have the kind of impact that these juniors and seniors had, I do see him becoming a top student, and I'll tell you why. It's a perfect example of a young man with extraordinary potential, okay? He's a ninth grader who played the viola, I don't remember what it was, and who had in his resume a huge list of awards, competitions, symphonies, orchestras, incredible venues where he'd performed, and he'd received a lot of awards. So he was top, very young in his talent. And meanwhile, he was quietly teaching a kid with cerebral palsy how to play the piano. Now, in itself, it's really very small. But what he had sent with his application was a photographic essay about him teaching. So I could see the student that he was working with. I could see the quartets and symphonies that he was part of, and how incredibly young he was. And I could see the parents grinning of the child with cerebral palsy as they're listening to their child play. And he quoted a letter that the parents had written, saying what a difference his piano work with his child had been. Because not only did this child get to physically work with his hands, but the interaction between his peers helped build his self-confidence. Now, was that extraordinary impact? It was for a ninth grader. And it made me care about him out of 30 of the scholarships, that I read, the essays. Why? Because he had been smart enough to do a photographic essay. He really had legitimacy with his talent, and he was this reaching out and helping this disadvantaged kid, and he had proof about it, the letter, the pictures of the parents. The other thing is, it was clear that he was really a volunteer, nerd. He really liked to volunteer. There was a huge box of all these glasses that he had gotten from various people to give to the poor. And instead of just saying that he collected glasses to give to the poor, to people who need glasses, there was a picture of a huge box filled to the top with the glasses he'd collected. It had an impact on me as I read it, and that's exactly what you want to do with scholarships, to get into summer programs, and also to go to college. No, he didn't have enough to get a scholarship, but if by the time he's a senior, he'd established a club or a service that taught kids with peer teachers beside himself, and he had numbers to show that he'd really made an impact, and proof of his impact, yes, with his piano excellence, his 4.0 and 1,500 on his SATs when he was a sophomore, he could get into a top 10 school because he's got it, and because we care about him. And the thing about it that I thought was so great, it was just very sincere. Now notice what happened. He was working with one child. With that one child, he had impact. How did I know? Because the parents wrote a letter. How do I know? Because there's a picture of the parents being so moved that their kids can play the piano. So this is very important. You've got to start somewhere. I think people get so eager that they get really impatient that by the time they're in 9th and 10th grade, they're not running something. No, you got to start small. So let me circle back to the 10th grader who said she helped shift the medical illness at her school, or the volunteer that started the volleyball team. The former didn't have enough evidence, and the latter showed me no impact. Two phrases you need to use when you look at your resume. Can I prove this really happened? And so what? These are the two words. Can I prove this really happened? And so what? So what that I set up a volleyball team? What difference did it make? Besides giving me volunteer hours. So, I worked at a senior center. I worked at a hospital. So what? How did it have impact on me? So all of this is background. And my reading of the scholarships has led me to suggest a few things to you that might really make a difference about scholarships. Okay? The first thing is, to do something extraordinary, you need to start in the ordinary and develop it. What do I mean by this? So I'll work with, a family and those animals. And he's in the 9th grade or 8th grade. And I'll say, that's great. Let him do some volunteer at the SPCA or the rescue. And the mother says, no. He already has a dog. I don't want to do the volunteer there. It's not big enough. But you see, this is a kid who may want to be a vet. This is a kid who needs to grow their social skills. And starting with animals is exactly the right place. Because, let me use an example. I had a very shy student that started out in an animal place. And, he swept and he took the animals out for walks and he helped feed them. And by the time he got to be a senior, he was running their volunteer service and training the volunteers. And he created two amazing things at that rescue place. One, he really did a great thing about matching up people with the dogs. Sometimes it's really hard to adopt dogs or cats. And so he would do this matching that was kind of like Tinder or kind of like eHarmony. So it was eDog Harmony. And it was very clever. And then the second thing that he helped do was to really have, once people adopted animals, he would do animal visits at hospitals, so to make people happier, senior centers, because they found, in studies that animals really take away the stress that people have. So that's what I'm talking about. He started very small, but he had 4 years to really grow it. So number two, Start with a talent or hobby. If you like to garden, then start with gardening at a senior center. I had a student that I asked her what was missing in her neighborhood, and she said, well, there was a park, and there was a path through the park, but no one could get through it because it was so dirty and not kept up. And I said, well, why don't a real cleanup of the park and really, clean up that path? And she did that, or the one that I always love, the young boy. Whenever I find a young man who loves to read, I love to see that grow. And what he did was he loved to read, and he volunteered doing literacy. He worked in the library. He started very small, just stacking books. He was very good in STEM, but he was someone that really loved to read. And there's this international thing called Book Builders, where you actually buy books for other countries. And he started very small in the library. By the time he was a senior, he had a book group. He had a blog. He was doing literacy volunteer. He was really made a huge difference, and he really was getting people to read. Do something extraordinary. You have to start somewhere, and you have to start small. 2, start with a talent or hobby that you love. 3, start small. Don't immediately say you're going to start a club. Start with yourself. So many of the scholarship essays I read, these kids had started clubs, but they went nowhere. I saw no impact. Okay, so I love that they, want to do volunteer service. That I truly admire. But to really show that they're superior, what they need is start with yourself and gradually see what's missing and supply it. So, for instance, it's like tutoring. Tutoring is a really excellent thing to begin with, because for kids that are shy but good in math, good in science, it's a way to give back to other kids in the school or give back to your community, and it's one-on-one, so you can develop your confidence. So this one kid started, he got training and learned how to do it. He realized that there was no tutor training at his school, so he started organizing it. And even though he was great in math and science, what he realized that at his school, there was no tutoring for essays, no help with that. So he actually started a reading and writing tutoring at his school. Extraordinary, Now, in order to do this, so you start small, you start tutoring. You see that a lot of kids need tutoring, but not just in math. They need it in writing and reading, and there's no one to do it. So what you need are 3 things. You need a Pied Piper, a champion, and a network. What this means is, if you are someone, I often do the Myers-Briggs with my students, and if you are someone that's an introvert and, very focused, but you really want to show extraordinary impact, somebody that's a Pied Piper, that's more outgoing than you. So when that person talks about it, people want to do it. You can do it together. There's nothing wrong with co-chairs, co-presidents, co-captains. So you get a Pied Piper, someone people will follow. You get a champion and an adult. This is very important, because I've worked with so many students that do speech and debate, or they do youth and government, or they do mock trial, and they don't really have a champion for it. And so it falls apart. Or HOSA. You really need a champion, somebody that gets it. Some faculty member that really wants it to be successful. And then the third thing is a network of help, which is 2 or 3 people to get it started. 2 or 3 people that you can rely on. You can develop it into a club and then be recognized that you've made an impact. Okay, so that's really ordinary. Idea, and you start a club. But then to go to the next level where you have extraordinary impact, you start a countrywide, a citywide program. Okay, you're put on the mayor's board. You get all the local libraries involved. In other words, you take this small thing in your church or your community center or your school, right? And you go citywide, you go countywide, okay? And of course, that takes a network of help to help you. But that's what they're talking about. regional, statewide, national attention for what you did. Extraordinary impact. You know, one of my favorite stories is this young artist, and I think he was like in the 8th grade. And for Halloween, he created a haunted house in the back of his house. Kids just loved it. And when he got to high school, you know, the art department said, hey, you know what? Let's just do my haunted house and let's make it a fundraiser. So they did it. And he did it all 4 years of high school. And each time it got more and more and more ornate, and kids just loved it, and they made a lot of money. And what happened is the local paper picked it up, and it actually went, you know, nationwide about what an incredible idea and how clever it was. So people started coming to him for him to show them how he did it and how he got people involved. Okay? And so, you know, he got into Columbia with that, with a haunted house. I love that. So, number 4, be so good they can't ignore you. It takes time, focus, a plan, and it takes legitimacy. You can't just start a club. You can't just get an idea and say you did it. You have to do it. It's not just that you do volunteer service. It's the story of that you don't apply. Your story applies. You don't apply for the scholarship. Your story applies. We see how you've had extraordinary impact if you write a good story, and that it has had extraordinary impact on you. And not only that, it has extraordinary impact on us, the reader, because of that. Number 5, but you also need evidence that you did this. So letters of recommendation, that it's in the yearbook, there's an article in the school newspaper, that the local newspaper picks up. Extraordinary, so that's just ordinary. Extraordinary impact is you need some sort of recognition or award, not just a Presidential Service Award, but some kind of regional, state, nationwide. And one of the ones we have around here is the Jefferson Award. And one of my students, I had triplets who were just absolutely amazing. And they learned how to code. One did Girls Who Code. They had various things that they did. And what they did is they took it back to their school. And they organized it, and they really had tremendous impact. And they were nominated for the Jefferson Award, which is a statewide, it's a national award. They were flown to New York to get that award. And all 3 of them got into Stanford. Extraordinary, okay? Because they really had that ordinary, extraordinary, and then the award to show it. So number 6, besides then, you start small, and you go to ordinary and then extraordinary, and you have extraordinary legitimacy and evidence, and you've got a great story about what you did. You also need the so what, and that's in your essay. The so what really means, well, why does it matter that you started an animation club? Why does it matter that you play for essay? And it also comes across in your recommendations. You know, with the UCs, except for Cal, there are no letters of recommendation, and Cal uses them now to when they're trying to decide people, they'll do every once in a while they'll do a recommendation for students, but on the whole they don't use them. Public schools don't, but private schools that use the common application do, and many private schools allow now for what they call a community recommendation. So you have your math and science, and then you get an English history for those 2 recommendations, primarily in your junior year. You want those recommendations to come from that year, okay? Because that's usually considered the hardest year for high school students. But the 3rd is a community recommendation, and you make sure that that recommendation is want to show you had extraordinary impact. Community recommendation can be from anybody, and it should be on a letterhead, and it should really talk about how much this leadership or how much this volunteer service meant, okay? Because you can say all you want about yourself, but you need backup. So when you do volunteer service, keep a journal. Because what happens is great things that kids say to you or old people or the adventures that you have, and you forget them because you're going to use it in an essay. Take photos. Do videos, because
more and more, what you can do is you can just put a link and show a video that you want of what you did, which can make a huge difference. This year in Claremont McKenna, they had a very neat thing, which was the 3-minute elevator speech, which was a video. So what Claremont McKenna did, an email saying, if you want, we will look at 3 minutes of an elevator speech, which means like you're on the elevator and you're trying to say to somebody, gee, this is why I should go to Claremont McKenna. Your reasons. Okay, so you get 3 minutes, which of course for me and my students was made in heaven because we already had a scholarship or college portfolio. And what this is your resume, but it's a particular kind of resume, which shows honors, awards, school activities, community activities, summer activities, and any kind of talent you have. It's really focused to exactly what they want in the application or in the scholarship. But the other thing with this portfolio is that it contains letters of recommendation from the community backing up that you did these things. And second of all, evidence. Pictures of the awards, showing you're skiing with disabled kids, whatever, so they can really see it. That's where your photographic essay would be. Or you could do a link for the video. But anyway, what I loved about the CMC is they actively said they wanted a video. So one of my students made huge impact on one of the clubs at her school. And I felt strongly in the scholarship portfolio that she should have, how it was in the freshman year, like with 3 people. Then by the time she took it over as a sophomore, it had 10. By the time she was a junior, it was like 40 kids, and they were winning tournaments. Do you know what I mean? You could really see exactly what she said in her essay, because she made a huge difference. And she even wrote a handbook for the club. I mean, just an extraordinary leadership. But she needed to show that was true. And so in that scholarship portfolio, clear recommendations that show that what she said was the truth. So on this 3-minute elevator speech, she didn't have to be in an elevator. She's sitting at her desk and she's saying, basically why Claremont McKenna should choose her. And one of the things is because she's, really made a difference at her school. And she talks about this club. And as she's talking, she shows every year as it starts really small. And by the time it's a huge popular club that's made a huge impact. And that means so much because you can see it. And her voiceover explains it very strong. So we're very fortunate that you can use video. We're very fortunate that you can use photography. And with a scholarship portfolio. Now, you can't use that with UCs. They don't want any supplemental material. You can't use that with Cal Poly. It doesn't want it either. And Stanford does not want supplemental material except material, but they don't want anything else. But the rest of the universe really does. Okay? So 7 was keep a journal. Number 8, do a photograph, keep photographs and video. 9, create a scholarship college portfolio, which is really a resume with evidence. And number 10, the question is, well, okay, all this is great, Barbara, but where do you find great volunteer opportunities, okay? Well, first of all, you want to find a theme or a major that you're interested in. So one of my students is a musician and a songwriter, and she works with, because there's not that much music in the schools in the small town where she works, and she is teaching a whole group of kids how to be songwriters, which has got them really into music. If it's STEM, or if you want to be a veterinarian, if you want to be a gardener. I mean, one of the examples that I who loved gardening, did it with her grandfather, was very shy, did her first volunteer at a senior center and worked with seniors to do the garden. She wanted to go to an Ivy League school, and I said to her, well, you better do some impact. You better find something else you can do with gardening. And so she made a beautiful space at her school where she had lunch. It had a lot of garbage. It had a lot of weeds. She got a network of help to help her pull the weeds and make it beautiful. She got a champion in the school. The vice principal really liked it. They raised money and got plants, put a bench. She then got, with her gardener in chief, they actually started a whole cleanup campaign for the whole school. She made a huge impact on this public school just by loving gardening and wanting to make something beautiful. And the mayor gave her an award for it because it was so extraordinary. Anyway, so start with what you love to do, whether it's writing or reading or you want to be a vet or you want to be a doctor, and go from there. One of my favorites is volunteermatch.com. You just go to it and you put in how far away from your home you want to go, a couple miles or whatever, and you put in your zip code, and then they give you some examples. Every city, San Jose, Palo Alto, has a city volunteer website with a lot of different ones. Now, the only thing that I want to say is, if you do something like, you're going to help the mayor, or you're going to go and help the Red Cross agency, the only thing that I want to steer away from is just, so I work with a student who's a senior now, really great student. Really got a Red Cross club going, and I was yawning. I'm so Red Cross. And then she'd already, before I started working with her, she had already had a volunteer service for the summer internship at the Red Cross, and I thought, boring. All you're going to do is answer phones and do paper, and that's exactly what she did. But she also, because she was there, was asked to be a member of the regional board. And as a member of the regional board, she was able to do a really stunning seminar and workshop about immigration, which she took photographs and she got articles about it, and the Red Cross wrote about it, and so it's really helped her. But that's what I mean. You don't want to just push paper. I have so many people say, oh, yeah, I have an intern. I went to Hong Kong. I went to Taiwan. And what did you answer? That you got to do something that allows you to tell a story, okay? How you grew, how somebody else grew, okay? The other thing I want to say is start young. Start small. Start in the 8th grade. Start in the 7th grade. Start ordinary. Develop real skills in tutoring and teaching. This volunteer also does social skills. One of my favorite stories is about a girl who was very shy. She started St. Vincent de Paul here in Oakland, and they have a place for mothers and kids to come, where the mothers can eat, the kids can eat, and the mothers take showers. So, there are a lot of homeless people. So she did that. She started first serving people, and then she noticed the kids weren't really being taken care of, so she started playing with the kids. She noticed that the kids didn't have many toys. She got some toys. Really loved music, so she did a fundraiser to get the music. She got a group of kids from her school to come and help her. She made a huge difference. She spent 3 years there. She also worked during the summer. By the time she left, they had a real program with the children, brought in more women to really help, and there were 10 kids helping her, 10 students helping her. So it was an extraordinary impact. It started very small. So start small. The number 12, go bigger, and then go extraordinary. Don't fake it. It must be legitimate. It must have evidence. It must have proven impact, okay? Like that young man who walked dogs. He created a volunteer service to match people with animals and have care dogs go to the hospital. The kid that did reading, he started a program that trained middle school kids to read, okay? And he also did this thing which is called, the entire high school is reading a book together and talking about a book. The gardening, starting small, and ended up cleaning up and beautifying a campus. This is what we're talking about. So the first little mantra I used was, I'm going to go back and look at it because I've already forgotten what it was. They can't ignore you. And then consider this like a campaign, right? And you pick your battles and you really focus on that campaign. Well, another one is do less, do it better, and know why. I have seen many Asian American resumes, and they are just stuffed with stuff.
And some of them don't seem very legitimate to me. Some, of course, do. What you want to do is make it very clear. The narrative is very clear that you did something, you really invested time, you were consistent about it, and that you had an impact. Truly, with very high SATs, with a high 4.0 in rigorous classes, a talent in music or art or whatever, and then a volunteer that you combine with initiative, you can get into an excellent school if you show, as Stanford says, extraordinary impact. So outside the box, but you first need to start in the box, right? So what I've done is I've developed an entire 20-step process to go from ordinary volunteer impact to extraordinary impact. And it's really a checklist where, a student can really look, because one of the things ultimately you're looking for is a smoking gun. And what a smoking gun means, in the legal world, it means that it is absolute, irrefutable evidence that he shot the person because he's holding the smoking gun. But a smoking gun can be anything that shows absolutely, it's irrefutable, this person made an extraordinary impact. So let me give you an example. At Stanford right now, I'm working with a student who is great in water polo. She is going to go to the 2020 Olympics, and she does, worldwide swimming. That's irrefutable. When somebody knows it's irrefutable. She has the Olympics. Do you get what I mean? It's irrefutable if you get the national merit or semifinalist. I want to point out something about that before we go. I know there's a big push to do the SATs really young, and that's fine. I mean, because you do need it to, in some very competitive programs for the summer. But truthfully, I've been working, I've worked with about 40 or 50 different programs this spring, and only Johns Hopkins, CTY, asked for the SAT. This is what I say to people. You get more bang for your buck because it's a smoking gun. If instead you focus before the junior year, because it's October of the junior year, that you take that you practice for the PSAT. They pick 50,000 kids to be semifinalists, and they cull them down to 10,000, okay? And right now I've got my seniors. The seniors, I have like 3 seniors that are semifinalists for the national merit. Those are the ones that are getting all the attention. You know what I mean? All the interest. Because it's irrefutable that they're tops. Out of 2 million kids, they're in the top 10,000. And we haven't even found out whether people are finalists yet. That'll come out a little later. But it's huge. What I'm trying to say is you get no bang for your buck to do an SAT in your sophomore year. Where you get the bang for your buck is the PSAT and getting that semi. Because if you have a 4.0 with rigorous and you're a really good test taker and you get a semifinalist, you are in. All you need to do is show impact, extraordinary impact with volunteer essay, because you're already in the top. So anyway, I have a 20-step process about doing that, to go from the ordinary to extraordinary, and how you do impact, and how you really find the story, and also how you find really good volunteer service. So it's been a privilege to talk to you. My email is college-quest. That's my website, college-quest.com. College Quest is my company. My phone number is 510-852-0447, and please call me. I'll help you in any way that I can. Thank you so much. As always, a true privilege to be able to talk to Tian Mu. One of the things that I've developed is I do have, a 1-hour consultation, which I think people get a lot of value from, because I look at what's missing from your portfolio. I look at how to position people, and that's just, that's a one-off, $300, and that's one time only. Then what I have, particularly for 8th, 9th, and 10th graders, because the earlier start, the better, I have a 4 meeting workshop package. I have a 6 workshop, and I have an
workshop. So you pay one price and you get 4, 6, or 8 meetings. Because one of the things that I found out with 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, when kids really like working with me, because I'm practical, I'm not going to waste their time. We're really looking at volunteer service that works. We're really looking at an essay to help you get in, how you can develop your leadership. It's practical. And I can do that in those packages. Then when you're a junior, because juniors need a lot more focus as they go into their senior year, that's when you can do the College Star program, which we meet more often, and we really get a lot of the work done, which is really important, because in your senior year, I try to get the essays and a lot of the things done. But here's what I want to point out. What's so important with 8th, 9th, and 10th grade is that when kids do these packages with me, they've got the volunteers started. They've got the leadership. They're going in the right direction. Do you know what I mean? Then in the junior year, we just start writing the story and really developing it.
Okay, sounds good.